Hello and welcome to the latest installment of Avenicast. I'm your host, Scott Dettman, CEO of Avenica. Happy to be here as always. And today joining me is Tori Tanaka. Tori, why don't you tell the people who you are and where you're from?
Awesome. Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I currently am an HR business partner at Uber. I support a portion of our global people and places function right now, covering talent acquisition, diversity and inclusion, and employee experience. I am originally from Naperville, Illinois, and I recently made a move to Brooklyn, New York. So it's been an exciting kind of personal move and challenge.
Very cool. Very cool. So originally from Naperville, so strong Midwestern roots. I think we've talked about this. Naperville is one of those cities where no matter where you are in the US, I feel like everyone knows Naperville, right? I think we've talked about that before. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive, right? It's a massive northwestern suburb right outside of Chicago. I feel like everyone had, if you're from the Midwest, you had some sort of like traveling soccer tournament there, a baseball game, tons of public high schools, a couple of private schools. So yeah, it's, I'm one of the few that can just directly jump to the suburb I'm from without saying suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah, it's like the mecca of all amateur competition of any sort in the Midwest. I feel like
that's exactly
sort of what that is. So I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you're probably right, because I think that was my first exposure too. So, well, cool. Well, excited to have you join me today. And as always, I'd love to start by you work at Uber, like that's pretty cool, right? I think a lot of people are like, "Wow, you work at Uber? That's pretty cool." And so I'd love to just kind of learn a little bit more about how'd you get there? Where did it start? Where'd you go to school? What'd you study? What was your path? What was your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think everyone has kind of their own unique, interesting journey, of course, kind of in college, and you've been figuring out where you want to go, what you want to do. I certainly was never the person that was born, woke up, knew exactly what I wanted to be, right? I remember my first kind of career day in middle school. I wanted to be an anchor someday on the news.
This is kind of like that.
I know, right? This is my chance. So I applied even for journalism-based schools. I applied for nursing programs, for business programs. I really was kind of all over the map. And I ended up selecting Marquette University because I felt like I knew I would change my mind throughout the course of my college career. And I felt like I could kind of do no wrong, no matter what school I went to, and really kind of liked the aspect of a Jesuit education and just some of the values that kind of come with that. So you actually probably don't know this about me. I was actually accepted into Marquette into the School of Nursing.
Okay.
I changed degrees or schools before I even started into biomedical sciences. And so I was actually pre-physician assistant for the first 2 years. I always kind of thought I had an interest in science or business. And so my logical approach was it would be way harder to switch into science later on than switch into business later on. So I thought, okay, let's do a couple of years of science. Let's see what happens. Tacked on a business minor just so I wouldn't get behind as it relates to kind of business fundamentals. And so long story short, was doing accounting 101 and also cadaver labs and physiology and OChem and all different combinations. But I think something that I've been doing since college is not only networking a lot, but really trying to experience a lot. And so I shadowed quite a bit of doctors and physicians and even hospital administrators to really figure out if this was what I could see myself doing. And ultimately, realized that everyone I was studying around had just way more passion and genuine excitement about kind of the future pathway. And so kind of said my goodbye to science, felt really good about that. And, then it was like, okay, what do I want to do with business? And of course, not really knowing which direction I want to go. I can still hear my dad's voice to this day, right? Because parents, I think, have definitely an influence on your college experience. He just kept saying, Tori, just get a technical degree, get a good business degree that really will be a good foundation and you'll be fine. And so with that, I selected finance, always have been just naturally kind of good on the numbers and analytics side. And I secured then my first internship with Harley Davidson. And it's funny how I selected Harley Davidson if you can think back to the first career fair you went to in college, you're like all blazered up, kind of like working on your elevator pitch, figuring out like which booth do I walk up to first. And so I'm walking around incredibly nervous and I see Harley Davidson and I'm like, okay, company I'm not going to want to work for, not connected at all. This will be my practice booth, right? They do motorcycles, they're in Milwaukee, we're good. And so I get into having a conversation and it just all flowed very naturally. I found out that they had these internship programs that were feeders into full-time rotational programs, which I thought was really interesting. And they're like, hey, we'd love to interview for this internship. So I'm like, great, this will be my practice interview, right? Still not sold, still not bought into it. Long story short, I ended up getting the opportunity offered to me and ended up taking that as my first internship. And all of that I think is really important kind of like context and of course foundation to, I think, where I even am today. So I started at Harley Davidson in a financial planning and analysis role. My real name is Victoria. I'm
learning all sorts of new things about you today. I feel like we don't even know each other.
You probably don't know this. This is great. And I remember my mom telling me at some point I would flip into Victoria, probably when I get into the corporate world. So I'm like, we're a finance intern, call me Victoria, right? Let's do this. And after the first week, I'm like, holy smokes, I'm sorry, I'm a Tori. Call me Tori. My boss didn't hear me correct him twice. So I was like, okay, we're sticking with Victoria. That's fine. Long story short, I'm doing this FP&A work, balancing, different income statements, working on the balance sheet, just different kind of more basic FP&A activity. And I was good at it.
Victoria work.
Real Victoria work. Yeah, exactly. And I was like good at it and picking it up quickly, but now what you probably do know of me sitting behind a spreadsheet all day long was just like, release me. I need to go talk with people, interact with people. And so I think a really important part of an internship experience, right, is to, not only are you experiencing a new role and a potential job, but you're also experiencing a culture in a company, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I ended up then staying at Harley Davidson long term is because during that internship, I really enjoyed the people I worked with, people that were there 10, 15, 20 plus years. Think about the mission of Harley Davidson, right? We fulfill dreams of personal freedom, like incredibly powerful. And the connection to their customer base was really something special. And so I felt incredibly blessed halfway through my internship to think, oh, okay, this isn't the job I want to have, but this is actually the company I want to start at. And that actually ended up being much more powerful, right? And so from there, and this is important, I think if you have a voice inside of you that's saying, this isn't the right job or this isn't the right internship, they were ready to offer me the full-time finance rotational program. And I said, sorry, this is a hard conversation. I'm not looking for that. I'm not interested in this. But then I proactively networked with all of the other rotational programs at Harley and set up coffee chats and lunches just to better understand marketing and sales and HR. And through all of those conversations, I just had this natural pull to HR. And so ended up applying for one of the two spots, ended up getting it. I still remember that interview to this day. These were executive sponsored programs. And so I feel incredibly lucky for kind of the rigor that was brought to the first few years of my career. But I remember Tana Calloway interviewing me and asking, okay, so why HR? And I said, okay, this is going to sound incredibly simple. And I'm really going to make this like more basic than I know it is. But at the end of the day, you are, a public company. You've got to deliver shareholder value. You've got strategic initiatives, projects, goals. You've got all the departments that make up of that. And then you've got the people at the foundation, right? And to bring in the right people, to put them in the right roles, to move them in the right way, to kind of work through all the change management that comes into play, that sounds incredibly fascinating and kind of like an always evolving problem space. And I want to be part of that. I'm going to be part of the foundation. So it's cool because I think that's why I'm still connected on the HR side today and why I still really fundamentally believe in what I'm doing. And I've been able to see that, of course, more and more as I've worked at these different companies, these different leaders. But yeah, that was kind of how, I got to Harley. And then like I said, I'm incredibly grateful and blessed for then what I had for the next 2.5 years. And I tell any employer maybe I'm interviewing with or talking with, I always start actually with my Harley Davidson experience, which, I think now 7 years out of college. And so it's like, okay, at what point does the first experience kind of drop off? Well, it's a really important part of my story because I learned real good HR fundamentals. I had executive sponsorship, but was also then required to present at an executive level so early on. I knew what a really great manager looked like. I knew that it was really up to me though to kind of drive the growth of my own career. So, and then the final thing I'll say is it was a place I could be myself from day one, which in today's world, I think we know is so incredibly important. And so I got to have that experience at my first company. Right. Which was an incredible lens to then look through as I'm evaluating what's my next step, what's really important to me, because upfront I had, such an incredible model.
No, that's great. That's a really interesting story, but also inspiring in some ways. And I think that the most inspirational part about it is that like from where you started in college to where you ended up at Harley, and then have gone since, you have displayed a level of pretty great confidence, right? And you've bet on yourself, and you've been willing to take some risks, because you're betting on yourself. And I think that's something that so few people are really willing to do. But once you make that decision and you commit and you kind of go all in on yourself, amazing things can happen. I think people see that. I think people respond to that. But then you kind of silence all of the angst that goes into all these questions about like, what should you do and what does this person think and what does this person think? You almost need to like get some silence, listen to yourself, and then just trust that you are in charge of your day and you can do the work. And if you're in that spot, it's a good place to be. I had no idea about your biomedical endeavors, or I have all sorts of questions about cadavers 101, whatever that was. We'll save that for a different day. You did leave out the really important detail of like Marquette and Harley being in Milwaukee, which is like, it's where all good things start. Just kidding. No.
I knew that was coming. The second that started.
I had to plug it in there somewhere. But I do also love the point that you mentioned about Harley's mission statement, or sort of what their thing is about personal freedom. And I like that because I've never worked at Harley. They know better than to hire somebody like me, so I've probably applied and never gotten interviewed. So just thanks, Harley. Just kidding. But I'm not like a motorcycle person. I know that you are an active motorcycle enthusiast and you have tattoo sleeves. Just kidding.
They're all hidden.
Yeah. But I think what's cool about a place like Harley is, what you connected to was sort of the authenticity, right? Like you get to be yourself, and it's about personal freedom. And with personal freedom, there's a form of expression, right? And like, I just think it's cool that like again, maybe more I don't know about you. I have all sorts of questions now, but like my guess is you don't own a Harley. You're not a motorcycle rider. I don't know if that's what it's called, but how did you fit into a culture that was built around bikes? Like if that's not what you do?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question, right? I definitely had a curiosity to better understand that culture. And there's a reason Harley Davidson has existed for 115 plus years now, right? The brand loyalty, the customer loyalty is incredible. But
people get tattoos on their arms and other places of their corporate logo. It's freaking insane.
We would always joke like,
cool.
Everyone has an iPhone, right? It feels like no one has like an Apple tattooed on them.
Oh, they
right?
don't. That's
not all of us.
Kidding. Yeah, no. But I agree. I mean, people put them on their cars like sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, but that's permanent.
It's funny though, because so in Milwaukee, Thursday night is bike night at the museum, right? And so some of my friends, we would go there, on Thursday nights just to kind of check out the scene, understand the culture. As an employee, you actually could get classes and get classes completely for free. So I actually did have an M on my license for 3 entire years. Never actually took out a bike on my own, but
you can say pictures or it didn't happen. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Hey, I have pictures. I can certainly send them.
All right.
But
we'll have to splice that into the video here at some point, of
all my fake tats too that are now removed.
Yeah, totally. We could probably edit those in.
But I think simply me going from like Victoria to very flipping to Tori and laughing about it and feeling comfortable about it, to my nickname in the office was Fancy Pants, because I wasn't the person that wore jeans.
Hold on, can you just repeat that? I lost you there for a second. Say it one more time.
Fancy pants.
Fancy pants. Okay, all right.
Super sophisticated, professional. Because I was the girl at Harley that liked to wear wedges in a dress. But some days I would do a leather jacket and jeans, and it really didn't matter, which I thought was really cool. Over time, we had an employee store in the office. We got discounts. Over time, my Harley shirt collection did grow. So I can't deny that for any of those Harley Davidson folks that may listen in at some point. That is true. That is real. But yeah, I don't know. It was kind of an easy culture to fit into. And I think people appreciated that I didn't care if I was wearing a dress one day and leather the next, or, it was just Tori's doing her thing. And I will say, I think at every company I've been at since Harley, I've always been me. And I think part of that is just the company and cultures that I've been lucky enough to be at.
Do you think, if you connect that back to, the confidence point and the ability to sort of bet on yourself, do you think if you didn't have that confidence and that willingness to sort of be yourself, do you think you would have even had a shot at a place like Harley?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. What I would say though is, while I certainly had confidence to bet on myself, 100% people in my corner, right? Mm-hmm. I think what was most important is I very early on wasn't nervous to raise my hand and reach out for help. Or I remember before telling the finance leaders that I wasn't interested in their full-time rotational program, which you didn't turn down the intern to rotational conversion.
No,
right?
It doesn't really happen.
Don't do that. I practiced with one of my friends in a conference room for hours on that conversation, right? And that gave me the confidence. And so I think by having that self-starter mentality of knowing where I need help, what to chip away at, and really just growing and building those types of relationships, that was incredibly impactful. And as part of these rotational programs, we had formal mentors assigned to us. And my mentor just happened to be someone that we just hit it off. And I kid you not, we talked this morning for an hour on the phone, just catching up. Cool. We probably talk every month. And I met her now 7 years ago, right? But you hear in business school, or at least I remember, your networks are so important. They're going to get you everywhere. And you go to these networking events and it's just really transactional. I would say building relationships just for the sake of building relationships is I can't underscore the importance of that. Because I was ready to leave Harley Davidson. I knew it was time for my next thing. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I was ready to get to a bigger city, a different company. I had a couple mentors talking in my ear. And all of a sudden one day on LinkedIn, I get this reach out from a recruiter who's asking me if I'm interested in an HR business partner role at Tesla. And I'm like, what's Tesla? I don't even know what Tesla is. My dad was like, holy smokes, do a Google search.
Wait, you didn't know what Tesla was? Come on.
I truly didn't know what Tesla was back in, that would have been 2016. I know it's pretty bad, right? And I didn't admit that on my first call. So I get there for the onsite, right? They fly me out and I'm like, hold on, I actually know someone that networks at Tesla. He was in one of the engineering rotational programs. Okay. And so I reached out to him and I was like, CJ, what's up? Crazy. I'm coming to San Francisco for an onsite with Tesla. He was like, guess who referred you? So he referred me without telling me.
Okay.
Never in a million years would I have thought that. But in my time at Harley, in these rotational programs, like I genuinely want to get to know my colleagues and my peers, and whether it's going out after work together or we did like random scavenger hunts through Milwaukee as like team building. I just like built a lot of these really beautiful relationships and friendships. And so very quickly, right, you learned that, wow, okay, that's true. Like you can't recreate that. And that, of course, that Tesla experience really then kind of lifted me off into some of the other things I've now been able to do. So the power of that is very real.
No, I think that's cool. And I think it's a good point, because so many people, when you talk about like networking, so many people I think have this almost misconception that they need to like network with people that could like give them a job tomorrow. Right. Like, and I think that's sort of the wrong idea. And in this case, what you're talking about is like, you developed almost like, similar level or peer networks. Right. And like by developing a relationship and network at that level, as one grows, they all grow. Right. You can kind of, manifest that way. And, but at the same time, thinking about networking, thinking about mentorship as sort of the counterpart to that, that's really important. So like the mentor plus the network, but not really expecting the mentor to be the network, right? I think that's an important component too, because so many people feel like, well, I'm being mentored by this person, I should now, have access to their network, and that's just not really how it works. But I think developing that network almost like laterally, and then having that sort of vertical mentor to help you sort of avoid landmines and stuff, I think that's huge, and makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I mean, so, when you think about, I want to, I guess, go back to one other quick point. I was thinking about like when you were at the career fair, right, and you decided to go, take a look at Harley. I think one of the things that we run into when we're working with candidates is a lot of times, talented people, smart people, accomplished people, they have a very specific focus, right? They go in like, I want to do this in this way, and I'm not saying you're scattered. All right, I wouldn't say that, but I would say that like your focus has been a little bit more malleable, right? Like in terms of like what you're interested in, where you want to go. So how do you sort of, because it seems like it's a good blend, right? Where it's like it's fixed but flexible, and I think that's kind of what everyone needs. You kind of go out and you understand, hey, I don't know everything, I haven't experienced everything, I need to try some stuff. How did you approach that? Like, how did you? Because I think so many people go like, hard one way or hard the other way, where they're just like totally fixed and focused, or they're just like, I don't know, I'm open to anything. Right. But it sounds like you had a focus, but it was a focus that you allowed for some flexibility.
Yeah. It's a really good question, and it's tough to answer because it's just kind of how I've somehow naturally approached things. I think reflecting on the question though, if you think about college, right, and the degree that you get, I was thinking about this morning a little bit. Everyone kind of knows the couple entry level jobs that you're going to get to or go for. So everyone's kind of like going for the same thing. And I don't know how many actually stop and like lift up to say, well, like, is this even really what I want to do? Does this really make sense with what I'm good at? Is this an industry I'm excited about? And so I feel like I've always tried to have a balance of like being really honest and realistic with myself and with where I'm good and what gets me excited, but like continuing to keep open a door of just like curiosity and newness and ambiguity and challenge. And I think over kind of my experience, I've come to know, where I'm good and where I still definitely have areas that I need to expose myself to just because I blatantly have no experience. Or maybe it's just a skill I need to develop and refine. And so I think for me, especially, like, I have been so much more focused on like the breadth of experience and skill, rather than I see a lot of folks kind of at the 5 to 7 year mark of experience, like so focused on that velocity and moving vertically. And I am just someone that would so much rather have kind of these diverse experiences and skills developed before really figuring out like what that top level looks like for me.
No, I think that's important, and I would echo that. I think there's a couple of things there. I think being the finance major with real life finance, experience, who's in the HR meeting, right? Like that, you have the skills. You're in the meeting because you're on the HR team, but now you're differentiated in a meaningful way because you've got the finance experience. That's advice I've actually given to people for years, which is find a way to get in the room, but to be different than everybody else in the room, right? Like you need to have the right skills to like be in the room and be in the meeting, but you want to be the one that's sort of like different than everybody else, because that means you'll have a unique perspective to offer. And that means people are going to listen, which is important. But I also think, the comments around sort of breadth of experience, it's so important because, business or anything is so interconnected, and there's so many different ways things can go. And I think careers used to be more linear, where they would be sort of like step 1, step 2, step 3, but that's sort of limiting. I think people that are willing to sort of step sideways or even step back at times, like take a step back, can sometimes go like 3 or 4 steps forward, right? I mean, my own experience, I know where I am now is in large part because I was the data scientist and I was on this track, and I could have kept going down that path. But then you start to just, your ability to go laterally starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and it just narrows. And so going and doing something, that was completely not data science, and like working in like a staffing industry and running a market and a region and things like it was a little bit terrifying, but at the same time, it equipped me to do what I do now because I had that other exposure. But why do you think more people aren't willing to do that, to take that risk? Because I think to me, it just seems logical, right? Like, you need to figure out how to do all these things if you want to do more, right? But like, what do you think holds people back?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit uncharted, a bit unknown, of course, not as secure. I think those are some of the obvious things that come to mind. I think there's another side of it though, too, right? Where you don't necessarily have managers or companies running at you to say, I know you have nothing to do with this, but here's the skill or whatnot that your experience could apply to. And so there's this like oftentimes, right, where I am maybe looking for a different type of opportunity, whether it's within HR, outside of HR, you're kind of trying to convince why your skills will be transferable or why your experience does or doesn't matter. And I am much more having the convincing conversations than the like, yeah, obviously, let's not even talk about that. What do you want to do? Right? That happens 5% of the time. So I think, as that other part comes into the fold more, there'll be a different level of comfort, as you see companies kind of adopting different practices, as you see your own peers and colleagues making those sort of moves. I know within Uber, we have a talent marketplace, right? That exists just for that reason, right? To really move talent into different parts of the business based on skill. And so that just naturally gives a different level, I think, of self-confidence when you see it happening, when you see it being supported, and you see it being vocalized. So I do think that's a really important link to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's one, having the confidence to try it, but also you need to have, you need to have a soft place to land too, right? Like you need to have someone that will sort of say, okay, we're going to, we think that you have potential. We're going to give you a shot. And you've proven through other things that you can perform. And so we're going to give you a chance to do that. It is sort of, though, when you kind of take a step back and think about it objectively, so much of what any of us does in any role in any organization isn't that different, right? Like when it comes down to like the core skills to really be successful in HR, or to really be successful in marketing, or really be successful in finance. Yes, there's some specific like language, vocabulary, maybe some tools or skills, and maybe some concepts, but I think when it comes down to it, it's so much of what we place emphasis on in terms of our function is really more kind of organization specific and it is not as drastically different as we kind of make it out to be, right? I mean, would you agree with that? Is that a fair assessment, or am I oversimplifying? Because I might be oversimplifying.
No, I think it's right. I think then there's the cultural component of the company that you're at that matters quite a bit. But I think outside of that, like, you know, I know I've had some unique opportunities recently at Uber to flip into parts of the business, and it's been empowering, or maybe confidence building to know that the skills I've developed from a people standpoint of just knowing how to work with others, knowing how to surface conflict in a meaningful way, like really easily translates to getting product and engineering to work together, right? I'm not a product engineering expert, right? But I'm in there as the ops person to surface consensus of some sort. And I never would have thought that the skills I've naturally kind of grown over my 7 years in HR would translate that quickly. So I don't think you're oversimplifying it. I think, you know, for some reason, there's just a level of discomfort I think that individuals and people still have with understanding those shifts and kind of the reality of them.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that. I think, you know, the point you make about the skills you've learned in HR, I think at its core, you know, sometimes those are referred to as like soft skills, right? I don't think they're soft skills. I think they're foundational skills, but the ability to manage conflict, to get people to work together, you know, as you progress through your career, you can either, I've always believed this, I got this advice once, where you can either pursue a path of expertise or pursue a path of leadership. And leadership doesn't mean you have to be a generalist, but it does mean that you need to be willing to cede expertise in some cases, because your expertise needs to be in leading and making things happen and bringing people together and getting more out of a group than they would have gotten, you know, to on their own. And so I think, you know, as you talk about that, that's what you've really done a good job at throughout the course of your career, which, you know, you've done a lot, right? In 7 years, you've accomplished a lot and you have a great track record. But I think it's the understanding of like, okay, business kind of works this way. These are some of the key sort of ways we measure it, ways we talk about it. Cool, that's finance. But then the core, and we talk about this all the time at Avenica, I mean, the secret behind great companies is great people. And if you can understand how to get people to work together, to get more out of people, really anything's possible, right? Any sort of innovation, discovery, you know, growth goal. I mean, it's all possible, you know, in part if the people can make it happen. So that's cool. No, I think that's great. So kind of random question for you. When you think back to your college days, was there any class, like one class in particular? And I'm asking you this question because somebody asked me it recently and I did not have a good answer. So I was like, I need to hear some other people answer this. Was there any class in particular that you felt like really opened your eyes or really sort of changed your trajectory, maybe good or bad? Right. So maybe it was Cadavers 101. Maybe you're like cutting into some flesh and you're like, man, I don't like this. I don't know if that's a thing. If again, more and more questions about Cadavers 101, because I think you said that. But was there a class that was sort of defining for you?
You know, it is a hard question. There are two that come to mind for me. One that I wish I probably would have paid more attention to. We had these classes called LEAD, which for any of my Marquette business fellows, they'd be like, really, you're referencing LEAD right now? Because it was the class we all had to take as business majors that prepared you for the workforce. And we had 101, 201, 301. And honestly, like I was half in, half out for most of those lectures. But like there are some very key things such as networking, such as not necessarily building the right resume, but kind of how to market yourself, how to brand yourself.
Sure.
Some of those things that, you know, I'm sitting here on a podcast talking about the power of networking in one moment of it. And I always jump to my LEAD 3001 class when I wanted to ignore kind of the advice and perspective I was being given. So, and funny enough, just 2 years later, I ended up being one of the presenters in that class to share about power, right? So it's like, okay, cool, full circle. So that one stands out for me. And then honestly, I think I would actually say like anatomy or the cadaver course in science really stood out for me. And the reason I say that is because I was studying nonstop in some of those courses, and I formed really important kind of peer study group relationships. Folks I'm still friends with to this day. They're all doctors, by the way. But I think there was a power of like just working with others and like being very, of course, individually focused on tests and grades and whatnot, but just genuinely being there to help each other. I was always the one that needed a little bit more explaining, and people always took the extra time to kind of walk me through things. And so just kind of like that peer-to-peer coaching that I felt in college was really meaningful. And then, yeah, just the cadaver example is like such a good example of just throwing yourself into something and being like, well, it'll be different. It'll be new. Oddly enough, I actually loved it. But yes, very, very, very different nonetheless.
Crazy. Yeah, I have so many other questions for you now as a result of this conversation, but we can save those for another time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that you've done some great things. You've taken some chances. You've taken some risks, but it's paid off. And so I think, the world should take notice of Victoria Tanaka. What's coming next? I'm sure we'll see your name in lights. So thank you. Sorry, I shouldn't, but I'm probably going to call you Victoria or Vicky or.
Okay, so that's Vic the one stipulation. Vic no, Vicky. Okay, Vicky's still.
It could be pretty. It's pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie. But all right, we'll that'll be a subject of another later podcast. But thank you so much for joining me. It's great as always to chat with you, and I'm sure the people watching or listening, got a lot from your experience, and I think you're a great example of what happens when people trust themselves and take some risks, but are also willing to work really, really hard. That's the one thing you didn't really talk about, but I think it came through subtly in everything else that you've done. I think you've never pursued a shortcut. You've worked really, really hard, and there's no substitute for really hard work. And so I commend you on all that you've done, and look forward to seeing what you'll do next.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. It was a pleasure chatting.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.